Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hey, Tone, thanks for jumping on today. We had a conversation the other day that got me really thinking, and I love our conversations, even the ones that go 3 hours and 20 minutes. And sometimes we make loops, and sometimes we don't. And then all of a sudden, you know how the universe brings you things, much like you have a feed, so it's listening, and all of a sudden, it's not universe. We know it's marketing, and it's intentional these days. But I woke up to a post today. Well, we're going to get to that. I want to really talk about the other things that have been coming straight up to me, which is I saw some people bantering about the value of executive presence. And there's a camp that says executive presence is bullshit. If you can do the job, you can do the job. If you can lead people, you can lead people. That was like so foreign to me. And my initial sense was, hey, this must be somebody who doesn't have it, doesn't recognize the value of it, doesn't understand what it does, and says, F it, flies the two birds up and says, I should have that job no matter what. The other part of me said, what's there? What is there, right? Is there something to it? Because first way to lose anything is to be anchored in your own thoughts and beliefs without taking a 360-degree lap around the track. So I want to chat about that topic a little bit today. And before I jump in with my experience, what's your experience with the people you coach and people having executive presence and maybe start off by how you interpret it. And then what have you seen? You coach, my gosh, hundreds of people over the years who are in these leadership roles, and you've seen probably people with a massive amount, a low amount. And how are they winning and losing from your perspective?
Well, I think the first thing is kind of defining executive presence and what that is, because it can mean different things to different people.
Yep.
I mean, executive presence overall might be the ability to color between the lines in a certain environment, knowing what to say, how to come across. Mm-hmm. I think politicians work on polishing their ability to communicate to people so that they come across in a way that connects with people.
Yep.
So I think if it was a leadership, characteristic, executive presence is the ability to probably communicate publicly in large forums and individually with people to drive an initiative, to paint a picture of a vision, all of the above. Back in the music days, like I was saying, it was the X factor. I think people who have or seemingly have the X factor. But I'll bet you the question that they were asking, or maybe the camps that you had heard, might have been more about, is it something that you can get? Is it something you're born with? So born or bred always seems to be more of the question. And, I think that's really the question. Can somebody work on their presence and from an executive perspective?
What's interesting about that is that early on, and admittedly, and I'll raise my hand and say guilty as charged, I thought executive presence, before I really understood it, was looking the part, not being the part. And so my early days at Lehman Brothers, I was very particular about what I wore. Oh, this is a senior person in the firm, always dressed to the nines, always looks like they're well put, Gordon Gekko, right? From Wall Street, completely looked like the Wall Street maven. And I'm like, oh, that's executive presence. I look like an executive. And honestly, part of that went not only from clothes, but to physical appearance too. Oh, you got to be in shape. It look like you have mastery of your whole life. It's physical. What I learned is that, the suits are the uniform. I get it. It was the former uniform of business. Even Zelensky wore a suit to the recent meeting with Trump, which is pretty interesting because he was not wearing suits. But I found out it's really not much of those things. Those are nice to haves. And there are people who have broken those molds. First guy come to mind is Steve Jobs. What was the Steve Jobs quintessential uniform? Faded turtleneck. Jeans and the mock turtleneck, right? And I had seen interviews and read where he said, this just, I only get so many processing units of brain power a day. And if I waste a few on what shirt matches what pants and what, ensemble am I going to put on today? Those are ones that don't help me create something great for Apple. And he said, so I just picked something that made me comfortable. And I just wore it every day. He said, I had like 20 of these shirts and 10 pair of these pants, and something was always cleaning in the closet. And so he was a guy that I woke up to and said, oh, this guy is commanding the universe, not just Apple. I mean, he gets the attention through those keynotes of everybody all over the world. And I would say he had a massive executive presence. And I realized quickly, it wasn't the suits, it wasn't the cufflinks, wasn't the watch, wasn't the haircut. And to a certain extent, it wasn't being ripped and jacked and in shape. While Steve was not, a fitness maven, he was a pretty lean guy and didn't look like a food abuser, so to speak. So I wonder what people are thinking about that. So you describe it as a style of communication. Let's unpack that a second, because communication starts when you walk in the room. So let me get your perspective on. Talk to me about how people communicate with more than words. And
well, hey, physiology matters. How you breathe, how you walk into a room, all of those things. Kind of, to me, I think it's really about just a representation of what's going on inside.
Okay.
I think somebody who's comfortable in their own skin is somebody who exudes a level of confidence about what they're talking about and how they communicate. And I think that comes across to other people. I always look at it from the person in the audience. When you're in the audience and you see somebody on stage or speaking, you really don't want them to be and feel uncomfortable, because how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
So it's almost like the elevator test. When you're in an elevator with people, there's a level of discomfort that you feel because people aren't communicating. And nowadays we look down at our phones. But how do you make people feel comfortable in those interactions that you have, whether it's one-on-one or one-to-many? I think that has a lot to do. And I think real executive presence makes the other person feel comfortable. And I think whether it's what you're wearing, or I think it's less about those things than the authenticity and the connection that you have with individuals when you're communicating with them. And people like who they wish they were more like, or, that's usually the saying. Yeah. And I think that's part of it.
What do you think is behind the thought process that executive presence is bullshit? Have you come across anybody who's thought that or doubted it?
No, but I think it falls in line with the emotional intelligence camp and the IQ camp. And clearly, the research shows that there's no hard line between the two. And I just recently reading that new book that's out there called Think Again by Adam Grant. And in one part of it, he brings up the Daniel Goleman camp of emotional intelligence and how that took off since 1995. And also a more recent, philosopher, if you will, or academic, Jordan Peterson, and his view of saying that it's been completely blown out of proportion, like DEI, and that it's just a checkbox.
Boy, that's so surprising for me from him. I looked that up after you mentioned that to me the other day, and I was shocked how much material is out there with that bias and opinion on it. I would love to see. He's a guy who cites studies, and he's opinionated, but he's strongly opinionated, backed by research mostly. Right, mostly, not all the time. But I'd be interested to know how he formed that opinion. Just like when I read this post on LinkedIn.
Probably from a lack of it.
Yeah, maybe so. But when I read this post on LinkedIn, it was interesting that the only people that commented were people who agreed. People who agreed. That was the only, that was it. That was it. People who agreed, yeah, it's bullshit. Yeah, everybody says I didn't get the next job because I lack executive presence. Yeah, I got turned over because some guy or gal looked good or whatever. But executive presence isn't isn't about how you look. It's, you called it before we jumped on here. You said, "Oh, we used to talk about the X factor in the music business, and the X factor was just, we used to say, you got it or you don't, right? Do you have it?" And it could be the things you just described up front. Comfortable in your own skin, I think, is a great lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not so much, it's how you make other people feel. So I think the people that believe, call it what you will, executive presence, X factor, again, it's all reflective of the perspective of the person sitting across from you more than it is from your own perception. So I find it a little unsettling that there's people out there that would believe that it doesn't exist or that it's not important. But it sounds a lot like the emotional intelligence side of things, which is, being self-aware, being able to self-regulate, just understanding the emotional makeup of the people sitting across from you does not come just from having an intelligence quotient that's real high. And both of us can name names and talk about people that we've heard are very, very smart, and clearly they are, but that they lack that ability to connect with others. And I think that if anything says it more, it's again, it's in the perception of the person who they're interacting with.
It's funny. I wouldn't discount how you look, and you shouldn't discount how you look, because there's this Harvard Business Review out there that did a study on executive presence, and they said there were 3 major categories of things people had. It was gravitas, it was communication, and it was appearance. Now, Jobs, while he wore the same uniform every single day, it wasn't dirty. There wasn't white powdered donut, sugar on his shirt. They were laundered, they were washed, they weren't starched. He didn't have the old cowboy jeans with the starch going down the front, but it was his thing. It was his uniform. But gravitas, pretty amazing. The Harvard Business,
you mean like confidence and ability to command a moment, a room. Gravitas, is that somebody who really stands out? What form of gravitas did they mean?
So let's talk about what it looks like in real life according to ChatGPT. Okay. And I said, hey, I just said to ChatGPT, unpack the Harvard Business study that talks about gravitas and executive presence, and unpack gravitas for me. And the gravitas, these are the behaviors that are associated with gravitas. Calm under pressure, very important. Sound judgment, confidence without arrogance, emotional control, integrity, and trustworthiness. That's a lot. We can spend a long time talking about all of those, but in my professional experience, and really even personal experience, when I break down these 5 things, calm under pressure, sound judgment, confidence without arrogance, emotional control, and integrity and trustworthiness, these are the people I attempted to model in my life. I would say that a good number of them had all of them, but there were some that had standout features. So if number 2 is sound judgment, there was always somebody who just picked it. They saw something, they understood it, and they were able to make a good judgment call on it. Calm under pressure, not all the time. See a lot of blow-ups. A lot of people get crazy over the smallest things. Man, I had a boss once who called me on a Sunday for, my team was in the midst of a release. And that particular Sunday, my youngest daughter was having a communion. And I left my phone outside the church intentionally, and it was ringing, and my team was pushing a release from the night before into the morning. And it was discovered in the morning that one feature didn't work. And it was not a mission critical feature. It's something that had been void for a very long time, not anything that needed to hit a compliance date. And this dude freaking lost it, dude. And then when I finally got out, there were like a string of phone calls from him. I finally called him. He's like, "You're not answering your phone." And he's like, and I'm like, "My daughter is having a communion." And I said, "I took myself out of play for 90 minutes. My whole team is working on this. You think I'm going to code and fix this problem myself?" Rah, 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 rah. And then finally, I had people coming back to my house and I had to say, "Hey, enjoy the food and the party. I'll be in the back room on the phone all day long." And by 5, 6 o'clock that day, I finally said to him, "Hey, listen, enough.
Yeah.
Enough." I said, "This is not a feature where anybody dies. This is not a NASA mission. There are no bad financial calculations. There are no spaceships that fall down, no rocket ships that explode mid-flight. This is a feature that's been void for over a year, and it'll stay this way for another few weeks until we figure out what the problem is and we get it right. And nobody's going to figure out the problem not having slept in 30 hours. Bad
well,
use
that was
of time.
a great description of somebody with a lack of executive presence in the form of self-regulation, because self-regulation ultimately is literally integrity and trustworthiness. I mean, if there's one feature that if somebody is self-regulated when the chips are down, that brings confidence and a feeling of confidence to those around them. And that is invaluable. Clearly, that would be a great example of somebody who didn't have it.
There are a lot of studies out there. Forbes had a big article on it. McKinsey Leadership Institutes constantly pushes it. And so I'd say the majority of folks may be listening to this and say, "Well, why is this even a topic? You're having a whole podcast because one person told you it was bullcrap?" No, there were like hundreds of comments on this thread. So somewhere out there, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people that lack the visibility into maybe the things that we just discussed here, which is purely just gravitas. It's not even the full executive presence. But, and so I was like, man, I just can't believe that there are so many people that actually believe this is unimportant. It was, I would say the corporate success I had were always about these things and even less about the technical savviness I had. For me, the technical savviness was the $5 ante in the friendly poker game. Had to be in the hand.
Yeah.
It was table stakes. I had to have it. Have you ever coached anybody who didn't think it was important, or if somebody who recognized it was and was working on improving it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I recall anybody saying that they didn't think it was important or it was bullshit or being passed up on jobs because somebody said that they lacked it. But I think that when somebody becomes aware of the fact that they're lacking in a particular department of, say, emotional intelligence or executive presence, it happened to me today. I mean, today I was coaching a guy who is become a dear friend of mine as well. And he was telling me, had I ever watched Ted Lasso or the Ted Lasso episodes? Lasso. Yeah. And I said, you're like the 10th person that, really, this is great. And then he really sold me on it. And one of the things that he said is, hey, through the opportunity to be in the coaching from his company and really focusing on himself as a leader. And oddly enough, a person that gives a lot of speeches on executive presence, the way he carries himself, he still said he's got a huge gap. And from watching that show, he felt that there was so many things that he could do more of in self-reflecting, because he's a type of guy that, everything's he's a hammer and everything's a nail a little bit.
Yeah.
He softened up a lot. But he even told me today that people that work with and for him said, what's going on? This is not the guy that we've grown accustomed to knowing. Something's changing.
Wow.
And I think it's really just like anything, you learn something new and you see that there's a gap and you want to close that gap. And he seemed really excited about the fact that he still had this distance to go, but now he'd become self-aware enough to know that everything coming in his life was reflecting this lack of it. So now that he's teaching it, if somebody to whom teaches, they say you learn twice, right?
Yeah.
Or he
Yep.
who endeavors to teach learns twice. So I think that when you're handed the mic and you're the person talking about something like executive presence, hopefully the mirror comes up and you have to kind of close the gap of where you have to get better as well. And that sounded like the feedback that I got literally this morning.
I'm smiling for two reasons. One, I'm smiling. The first step is you recognize the need to change. Like, wow, I don't like how I show up here, there. I don't like how I feel after that reaction. I've had the same reaction my whole life or for a long period of time. And the reaction I get from that reaction is not the reaction I want. It's one thing to put in the work to try to make those changes. The biggest gift, if not the first and last, is when others recognize it for a positive.
Yeah.
That makes me grin. And because I like people growing and winning, whether I'm involved or not. And just by you sharing that conversation with me, somehow I feel like I'm attached to this guy and want to see him succeed like 50 times more.
Of course.
Because
Yeah.
It's a tough journey. It's really, regulating and adjusting yourself and having the ability to keep your mind open for change. And as we all know, as it gets older, we always say the abbreviation, I'ma be me, right? Hey, it's just me. It's just who I am. I can't take the spots off a leopard. No, not really. I mean, you're not a leopard. Yeah, and that is true. You can't take the spots off a leopard, but the leopard, won't eat its young. It will fight others for it. And so there is a sense of sensibility there. We're not out in the wild. We're not out trying to survive just to live another day. Like, we all don't have to be leopards. And certainly in a workplace, when you're dealing with rabbits and squirrels and monkeys and mice and dogs and cats and horses, you can't be only a leopard. You've got to do it. I love the story about that guy. And what I love most about it, to be honest with you, is that other people are recognizing, because I bet you that guy, he's going to dig in harder and deeper now. He's like, holy cow. Like, look at how this changes. There's a couple of things here. And this is, I deconstructed some of that Harvard Business Review. And I'm going to read this to you. I didn't read through it yet, but it says, hey, here are some things you can do to improve your executive presence. First thing, it says how to build gravitas, and it's how you show up under pressure. Slow down your pace. Speak with certainty, not over-explaining. Man, those two hit hard. Those are so easy to do, and as you say, so easy not to do. But think about that for a second. The pressure's up, everybody's on edge, and you bring the pace down. It's not a lack of urgency. It's clarity and communication, and it's certainty, right?
That's
and over-explaining is death, Tone.
Yeah.
It's death.
Well, some people are verbal processors. I know I am.
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, as an introvert, if somebody asks a question, I like to really kind of think about it. So I don't just jump to the first thing to figure out what I'm going to say next.
Yeah.
So I like to really pause and think about it, which puts me at a slower pace. But for sure, I work out ideas by verbally communicating at times and going through things. And a lot of, clients are that way too, which if you're in a public speaking environment is really tough to be in the audience for, because, it's kind of shifting and focusing. What are the 3 bullets and how are you going to hammer those things through? And how can you process that information in record time to get the point across? A coach that I had once said to me, anytime that you're going to speak publicly, just think about the one thing that you want to communicate. What's the one thing?
Yeah.
And, it's usually in how you come across. It's usually in what the overall statement is. What do you want people to walk away with? What is the chorus to the song? And that makes it a lot easier because if you're clear on what that outcome is, then it's a lot easier to be more succinct.
There's a question I always ask myself, and I was coached to ask myself this question by a boss from the early 2000s. And he said, this question will serve you well when shit is hitting the fan or when you're in a thoughtful, strategic meeting where the pace is slow. Your people are expected to brainstorm, discounting the fact that your ideas might come in the shower while you're singing a song. And he said, and the question you should always ask yourself is, what matters most here and why? And he said, and that question will always lead you down a path of providing the best results and getting to the right place. But you've got to really be able to define it. Like what really matters most here and why. And because I'm sure you've been in a room where let's talk about the crisis, shit is hitting in the fan and everybody's focused on, these ancillary things, but there's a fastball coming down the middle and somebody's got to hit it. That's what matters most and why. I remember doing disaster recovery planning, and we had to send out this questionnaire. And we asked everybody, we had to set up applications. There were hundreds of applications in the company, and you had to tier them. Tier 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tier 0 is the infrastructure for these applications has to be 99.9999, right? 5 nines. I mean, you could really have no interruption because without these things, the ship sinks. Tier 1 was, and this is changes for a company, was 1 minute to 2 hours or to 4 hours. Everybody adjusts these tiers differently. There's probably an ISO standard that has changed, but people sort of adjust their tiers depending on what sort of value they lose versus how much they'd spend to put them in to set those tiers. 4 to 8 hours, 8 hours to 24 hours, greater than 24 hours, right? And so you send this questionnaire out and it says, hey, if there were an incident in this building and we had to recreate everybody's desktop, what applications are in these tiers? And there were very strict details like how you should be thinking about the work you do, what happens. And we also said, and this is what's important, right? We can't interrupt customer transactions. We've got to be able to communicate with a customer. And so we got back the questionnaires, and when it came to the marketing department, Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop rather, were tier 0. Could never go down. And so we weren't an art firm, we weren't an editing firm. We were a mortgage company. And so I'm like, how does this keep a closing from happening? How does it make a closing happening? How does it drive new sales or new revenue? How does this, not create an interruption for the customer? And, it's funny because we went through it and classified all of those. You hear my dog barking back there? It's pretty interesting. She's going nuts now. It's funny. But, we had to really go through it as a committee and then say, here's how you classify. And the point is, what's most important and why? Right? So if you ask yourself that question, you can easily then put the same measure and balance against all of the things that, were in these tiers. But whether it be crisis or even in a strategic meeting, it's interesting. It's a good take. It's a good take on how to deal with that.
Hey, what was the social media platform that you saw this group of folks that were saying that that executive presence was it LinkedIn?
Absolutely, proverbial LinkedIn.
Yeah. But it's still such a small microcosm of probably what's really out there. Even 100 people is very small, right?
It is, but relative to the number of views that post got, it was a bigger percentage than I had thought.
But the only people who commented were people who were in the negative.
Which was surprising until I commented.
Posted it.
Until I commented, and all I did was I pasted the link in to the Harvard Business Review, and I posted something like, "Hey, this is a very interesting take on executive presence." I said, I have found in my experience that there's another side to this view, and to offer another perspective, you might want to check out this article that was done by the Harvard, this research that was done by the Harvard Business Review. And I'd like, after reading it, I'd like you to come back and comment and see if, hearts and minds have been altered at all. Mm-hmm. And there were people who basically said nothing. People had said, thanks for the article, I'm definitely going to read it. And there were a couple of people that came back and said, read it, and it's paid for bullshit or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get in an argument with somebody, but just to get somebody to think. And then I'm like, why did I even drop that in there? But I have found so much success through, following those guiding principles throughout the last 30 years that I can't imagine others wouldn't as well.
I would say, to say the least. Like I said, IQ's table stakes.
Yeah.
No doubt. But the EQ keeps you in that role and gives you opportunity for advancement. I mean, anybody that I would model myself after, I would think would have a high degree of all of the above, as opposed to lacking in any one of those. I mean, what great leader has all those? Although Jobs, some of the stories that you hear about Jobs definitely
maniac
behind the curtain, what he was actually like.
Oh yeah.
But he was a man on a mission. And I think that comes across too in a certain level of executive leadership, and for sure, or executive presence in the form of leadership is, leaders are on a mission. And it can become infectious for sure.
There's really great stuff here that I want to read into the feed here. And so, you slow down your pace, speak with certainty, not over explaining, lead with values and clarity. Great. Got it. Here's the one that really, I thought was great. Improve nonverbal presence. Anchor your posture. Mm-hmm. Feet grounded, shoulders open, chin level. I mean, that whole thing we talked about changing your physiology. Tell me what happened when that whole thing happened, when you saw Robbins go through a breakthrough with somebody and he started by changing their physiology.
Well, I think just in any of the interventions that I saw Robbins do live and in person, always had a huge component of physiology to it, whether it was getting somebody to run up and down the aisle, but really being able to change somebody's state. Because what most people don't realize is that the state that they're in the moment shapes the decisions they make, and the decisions they make shape their destiny. I mean, I sound like Robbins now.
No, that's
but
cool.
The moral of the story, it's so true. But people don't really understand that they're in control of their state. They think their surroundings and their environment is controlling their state. So it takes a lot. But I always say when I'm working with people, and even for myself, if I feel down or I don't, whatever is going on in my head, I say, how fast can I change that to shift to a different perspective and change my state to get the outcome that I want? Because the outcome of somebody who says they're depressed behind door number 3, we can describe what they look like, what their language patterns are like, how they're breathing without even seeing them. And the reason for that is because we've all done depression at some point in our lives. But you're not going to solve any problems from being in that state. So the person who's in control of their state is always the person that seems to lead. That person who's always has the capability of putting themselves in that moment and not letting the moment overtake them, and being in control of and being able to self-regulate is like ground zero. Yeah. Because you have to change somebody else's state to be a great leader, not just your own. And I think that's what comes across.
You want to hear something crazy? When I was reading that and I sat up and put my shoulders back and checked my chin, I felt different.
Yeah, of course.
I legitimately felt different. I felt different. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Here's another one. Own the room before you speak. Walk in slowly. If you're going to sit down, look around a little bit. Survey the room. If you're going to sit, do it before you sit. Have an awareness where everybody is sit. Make eye contact in a triangle. Make your gaze across 3 people when speaking. Right, so I'm not just staring at you. Like, engage the audience. Find your triangle so you're covering the spectrum. Really, really good. Use few gestures, but make them intentional. The number one reason or whatever, if you're constantly the person who talks with their hands, it's a distraction. By the way, it's the reason I don't like Kenny Chesney live.
Why?
He does this thing with his hand all night long, and it drives me completely nuts. And I thought it was just me, but I went to the concert with a buddy, and we left the concert. My friend Randy's like, yeah, not so much. I didn't like it. And it was him, and it was Zach Brown Band, right? Zach Brown Open. He goes, I liked Zach Brown Band. And I go, yeah, me too. And he goes, Chesney, he goes, did that thing he did with his hand, did that bother you? I go, oh my God, it's exactly why I didn't like it. He goes, yeah, it was too much all night long. And I go, you don't think somebody would tell him that, or he'd watch himself on a video and go, I do this thing with my hand all night long? It was very distracting. It wasn't an emotional thing. It was not like Freddie, doing all the stuff that he did. Improve your executive energy. Don't bring urgency unless it's needed. The story I told earlier, it's great. Keep your tone neutral when stressed. If people hear and panic in your voice, you've lost the room. Be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Okay. If the room is tense, bring calm. If the room is flat, bring energy. I love that. Improve appearance without making it about looks. That's pretty interesting. This is the least important pillar, but it matters because it removes distractions. The goal is nothing about me pulls attention away from my message. I should call our buddy with the hat and see what he thinks about that. Wear what fits the culture, but signals the next level above your current role. Dress for the part you want, not for the job you want, not for the job you have.
Well, it's also, like in the classical guitar world, if you're playing to a room of people in suits, then you're wearing a tux. If you're playing to a room that's just, say, dressed professionally, then you're wearing, a sport coat and nice pants. So, as the performer, you're going to dress one up. But I think, a lot of these things is kind of reverse engineering what people do when they're comfortable. I remember Robin saying he became the speaking class that you could take? Toastmasters.
Toastmasters.
He was nominated Toastmasters of the Century.
Wow.
He had never taken a class, not even one.
Wow.
So, what does that say? So they tell you all these things, where to put your hands, don't put in your pockets, don't do this, don't do that. But I think ultimately that if you have a message, nobody's counting the ums, it's a sign of somebody being uncomfortable. But I think ultimately it's really it's the message, it's the messenger. And I think when people are comfortable, they do look around the room. They do things that when they're comfortable in those environments. So I say, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Get comfortable in your message, get comfortable in your own skin, and that'll come across more than trying to remember that you're not looking at somebody longer than 6 seconds, or, look at the back of the room, or how you're pacing and how you're talking. I think it's just, these things will come more naturally if you're just comfortable.
Hey, you and I always pull the music analogies here, and it's like practicing guitar and performing on guitar. You practice on your guitar to be able to do the things you want to perform. So you have the brain finger control. If it's guitar, you've got, the knowledge of the fretboard. You can do all of these technical things. But if you're soloing and riffing, like you're just out there and you're just doing it, and you're not thinking about your hand position and that. It frees you up to think about, can I drop my Les Paul 2 more inches? Should I run across the stage? Is there somebody I can connect with in the audience? But I'm just doing it all,
100%.
Here's one that's really great. It says, know your 3 most important messages, anticipate the toughest question. So if you're getting in a room, you're never going to know what everybody's thinking. But, if you kind of know the topic, right, and you're going to get lobbed with a softball, have a 20-second answer for it. No more, because you need, and that will drive certainty, and certainty brings trustworthiness, right? And if you can get both of those things, you're you're just you're in good shape. Here's another thing, a quick diagnostic question. Which area is your biggest opportunity right now? This is the thing that we talked about earlier. Gravitas, confidence, calm, and authority, communication, clarity, brevity, and influence, nonverbal presence, posture, energy, eye contact, preparation, and executive thinking. And this was a prescribed plan to sort of judge yourself in these areas, or to have somebody else judge you, really. Day 1, record yourself speaking for 60 seconds. Just watch it once. Day 2, practice speaking slower with pauses, same scripts. Day 3, cut filler words and crutch words. And while you said before, nobody's counting your ums, that's for certain, unless you're a Toastmaster coach in the back with the clipboard. But those ums drop confidence down and certainty for sure. Use headline first communication messages in meeting, right? And so, and it's really so true, because this is something I learned over time. Nobody taught this to me. I had to figure it out. I used to prepare these amazing decks, and the punchline was the last page, or the second from the last page, because the last page was next steps. And I thought I was going to, build up this. I thought it was the guitar solo, so to speak. I was going to write this beautiful song, and then boom, and the solo came out, or in this case, maybe the hook. But when the executives are in the room and they want details and slow, and meaningful with certainty and numbers, I move that last page, or the second to last page, to the very first page. And I would say, today I'm going to ask you for $2.3 million. The result is going to be, we're going to get 3x in return in 12 months, or 2x, or in 18 months, or whatever it was. It's going to take 6 months to do the project, and it's going to impact sales, operations. We're going to need some training and done. How does that all sound? That stopped everybody from thumbing through the deck to get to the punchline, to the very back. And that was part of the, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. And so once I put that into play, changed everything. Practice calm responses to challenges. People are going to ask you the craziest stuff. Improve posture and eye contact. And lead one meeting with clear framing and a strong close. And I guess as you evaluate those things over those 7 days, you come back, and if you had recorded all that, I guess the 60-second thing is what people can look at. You re-record it, right? And you come back, and you can assess yourself and have a friend or a colleague or somebody else understand the subject matter and what the definitions of these areas are. Be pretty interesting to do. When you're coaching people, say, Coach, man, I gotta fix my executive presence. The people told me I kind of lack it a little bit. What would you do with somebody in that case? How would you deal with it?
Well, I guess it depends on how soon they're going to have to be tested on it. Say it's a presentation or something. But what I really found is me and you have called it the 3330.
Yeah.
I now use the term core story with a lot of clients.
Love it.
Because when I go 3330, they always, what does that mean? I walk them through it. But at the end of the day, it's really the same. And what I find is everybody has like a great core story, from where they grew up, to their experiences throughout their life. So I always ask people a bunch of questions like, hey, tell me back where it all began. Like, where are you from originally? It's almost like the first phone call I have with them is, walk me through your journey. And there's so many nuggets that come out that I remind them about later, that they know that I'm really listening for, or they forget that I even knew them. But because that's when I'm paying the most attention. So I think, if you're going to bring out executive presence, that confidence doesn't come from just saying to yourself, I'm confident and everyone likes me. I think it's from really, going back, like, hey, what are the questions like in any job interview nowadays at a high level? They're all behavioral questions. And I remember having clients, like, they'll Google the 30 top behavioral questions in top interviews, and they can never think of anything. They don't have any answers. They don't have any stories. They meander and they're trying to think about it. And it came from kind of reverse engineering that. But if you walk somebody through their own story, or they walk you through theirs, all of those things come out. The struggles that they overcame, their strengths, their weaknesses. And if they really know that going into it, they may not need those stories in that interview or in that presentation, but just knowing that they're there somehow gives people the confidence of knowing more of who they are, what they're about. And as we know, they're more self-aware with that information. So I've seen that other way kind of backstop because, again, reverse engineering it.
Yeah.
If you're working on your hands and your uhs, it's a long path. But if you're working on, just being comfortable and knowing what you're talking about and really trying to convey a message to another human being, you just don't do those things. So it's a lot easier. You don't have to count, again, how long you're staring at one person. To me, it seems like it's the opposite. But one gets you to sign up for a class for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And the other one is, to me, a much shorter path and a much funner journey.
Well, I did a little digging while you were telling me that. And that McKinsey leadership study, I said, hey, are there any studies out there that tie in the ability to have a core story that will, build certain things needed for executive presence? And I said, what are the things, the question exactly was, how will a core story, how could it impact executive presence? And it basically came on to say, hey, it will increase your gravitas right out of the box because you can get people buy into what shaped you, what you've overcome, what you've learned, what you value and what you will not compromise. And if there is a reaction in the room that people go, wow, yeah, that's something I can get behind, it will immediately improve your gravitas. Leaders without a core story, they feel reactive. It's like, we're not sure where this is coming from, what you grounded it. Leaders with a core story, like who act in the things aligned with that core story, they feel intentional. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And people, and then trust goes up through the roof. So, hey, it's good stuff, man. We could talk about this thing all night long, but let's put a pin in it here, man. Appreciate it.
Great stuff. I love it.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.